one of the number one jobs that comes in that is not in your job description once you hit director level and above is alignment. You must be spending time with other directors, particularly in other departments, so you can align with them and get on the same page. So when you make decisions, they feel like they're bought into those, and you're also not making a decision that then causes a problem in another part of the organization. Because if we don't align, that's what happens. And as I've said before, alignment, that's 10% of our time each week. That's invisible work that we should be aligning starting at the director level. That's half a day a week. And here's the kicker. With every promotion, you have to add another 10%. So by the time you're a C-level executive, you're spending 50% of your time on alignment. Nowhere is that in your job description. This is the Leadership Foundry podcast. I'm your host this week, Brandon Smith. And joining me this week is my wonderful, amazing producer, Whitney Mendoza. Whitney, how are you?
Good, Brandon. How are you? It's great to be back.
Great to be with you here today. Whitney, I say that, but I'm a little rowdy about our topic today.
Yes, I sense this.
I am. I'm a little edgy. I'm a little irritated. There's a piece of research that came out that I frankly think couldn't be further away from the truth. And it actually steers us away from what we should be doing, whether we are a senior executive or we are new in our career. So here it is. So this entire piece of research is focused on this thing the researchers are calling invisible work. And so what they're basically saying is, hey, you all are doing a lot of work out there and not getting paid to do it. And that is unfair. And it's targeting groups, and it's making people do stuff that they're not getting paid for, and it's bad. And we need to bring this to light. So to go a little bit further, to quote in this Psychology Today kind of article that they've got that's spotlighting this, they said invisible work, this is a quote, invisible work. So quote, invisible work includes critical but underappreciated tasks, mitigating conflicts, providing cultural translations, mentoring, managing office social dynamics, and we must move it out of the shadows and into the realm where everyone's work can be valued and appreciated. What they're really saying is you got to get paid to do all that stuff. So the reason why I don't, so and a lot of people are nodding going, oh yeah, I've had to do a lot of stuff that wasn't in my job description. Yeah, I get it. Everybody's had to do that. But the reason why I don't like where they're taking this is it does two things. First, it puts us again in one of those positions of victimhood, resentful, I've been taken advantage of. And our entire social consciousness right now is pushing everybody to figure out how and what way have they been victimized. Not good. Okay. The second one, which I don't like about this, is if we follow this, then every time you ask someone to do something that goes above and beyond, they can just turn to you and say, hey, I'm not getting paid to do that. I'm not doing that. You go to a restaurant and you ask the wait staff for a favor and say, hey, can you box this up? And, oh, can I have extra sauces on our way out? I'm sorry, I'm not paid to do that. That's what you're going to get in a restaurant. I mean, who wants that? Or you're at work and a manager comes over to you and says, hey, we just hired this brand new person. Do you mind just shadowing them for maybe a week and just, providing them a little bit of coaching, just be a resource for them. Don't get paid to do that. I'm not doing that. I don't know about you, but I don't want to live in a world where people are constantly so transactional that they're not willing to lift a finger and help unless they are compensated for it or it's in their job description. It really actually pulls people away from the idea of a salary. And we might as well just go ahead and start with time clocks again. Everybody locks in, just clicks their time clock, clicks out. And maybe that's where people want to go, but we'll talk more about it. But there are so many things wrong with this piece of research and what its implications are. First of all, I think the research found fundamentally it's flawed. I think their assumptions are flawed. But more importantly, if you go down the line where these researchers they think they're taking us, I don't even think they're thinking that well about this. It really creates a world that is quite unpleasant for all of us. Not a lot of kindness, not a lot of compassion, not a lot of people kind of, going above and beyond or doing one of those kind of moments of gratitude. None of that. No one's going to do any of that because they don't get paid to do that. And that's invisible work. So it really is just not my not the direction I think we need to go in. And I've got some thoughts on where I think we can take this and spin it the right way. But I want to pause. Whitney, when you read this or you're hearing me talk, what was your reaction to this?
Yeah, absolutely. When I read this, and you quoted this on a show, I believe, with between you and Randy, some episodes ago, but essentially you said a manager becomes a manager because they're doing manager things, right? You don't
Yeah.
step up to the manager plate only once you are called. Those senior leaders see what you're doing, that you're going above and beyond, giving extra effort, and that's what allows you to stand out in order to get those promotions. So that's kind of what was going through my mind as I was reading this.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take it from two different angles. I'm going to take the obvious angle, and then I'm going to take the not quite so obvious angle.
Ooh,
So the
okay.
obvious angle is someone's more junior in their career, and we're getting a lot of this pushback right now. Well, I don't have to go in the office. I'm not going to go into the office. I'm working from home. They can't make me. There's some kind of, again, consciousness with 20-year-olds thinking that, I'm only going to get paid exactly what I'm paid to do. And they don't realize they are shooting themselves in both feet, not just one foot, both feet. Because when it comes time to who we're going to promote, think about it. If you had your own business, everybody listening to this, even if you're in your 20 somethings, and you got a whole bunch of people that say, I'm not coming unless you pay me. And then you've got one team member that shows up every day, and they come in and they've got a great smile, and maybe occasionally bring in donuts because they love donuts, their favorite donut place, and they just wanted to share some donuts. And these people come in with a great attitude, and they stay late, and you can count on them for any kind of work you might need. I know I'm painting almost a ridiculousness in this picture, but that's the person who's going to get tapped for promotions. So even
Yeah.
when a great example, if we're in your 20s or 30s and you're listening to this, and you've been told you only have to go into the office 1 day a week, why not make it 2 days a week? That would be considered invisible work to these researchers, but that's how you're going to get on people's radars. That's how you're going to get platformed. Might even be when you bump into the CEO in the elevator and they say, "Who was that person? I'd love to learn more about that person. I'm going to follow their career." So we can see the obviousness in it when we look at junior employees. And everybody listening to this who's in their 40s or older, that's how you got promoted. You went in and you did some of that extra stuff that was necessary to get the job done. Maybe it wasn't in your job description, but work doesn't always fit our job descriptions neatly. Now let's take that and extend it. Okay, now let's talk about our friends who are vice presidents or above. Ladies and gentlemen, it's all invisible work. It's all invisible work. If you want to be an effective executive, it's all invisible work. None of it is in your job description. Very little. So again, I don't know how these researchers can navigate what they're saying here when you've got a leader in a role. So I'll give you a great example. Number one, I talk about this in all my sessions. Randy does too. One of the number one jobs that comes in that is not in your job description once you hit director level and above is alignment. You must be spending time with other directors, particularly in other departments, so you can align with them and get on the same page. So when you make decisions, they feel like they're bought into those, and you're also not making a decision that then causes a problem in another part of the organization. Because if we don't align, that's what happens. And as I've said before, alignment, that's 10% of our time each week. That's invisible work that we should be aligning starting at the director level. That's half a day a week. And here's the kicker. With every promotion, you have to add another 10%. So by the time you're a C-level executive, you're spending 50% of your time on alignment. Nowhere is that in your job description. But half of your time is herding cats. It's jumping into meetings. It's resolving conflicts. It's taking people out to lunch. It's having, talking about why you two need to get on the same page. It's so much of that is alignment. The other one is when you start to get into those more senior roles, you're no longer competing with your peers because you all represent and run a part of the organization or the business. And so it really is more like a basketball team. To use a good analogy, you got to pass the ball a lot. And that's, in some ways, that's also invisible work. So I'm going to make time to help this other leader over here get a big win on her or his, balance sheet. on their performance review. I'm going to help them get a big win. That's invisible work. And that's a big part of being a good team member at the executive level, is learning how to share and collaborate. So very important. So I'll share a quick story, and then I'd love to get your responses, Whitney. So several years ago, I was coaching an executive in a major Fortune 500 company, and all the feedback that was coming from this executive was amazing. I mean, they said that he could be the next CEO of this business. And he was a really good fixer. He was good at getting into businesses and fixing stuff. But it was all the invisible work stuff that we're talking about here. That's what he was getting in trouble with. He wasn't doing it. He was doing just his job, and he was doing it great, but that was it. And part of his job was he would go into board meetings. Well, I interviewed one of the board members, and what she told me was, she said, we have these board meetings, and he always comes, and it's good. But she said, as soon as the board meeting ends, he's the first one out. Like he is, as soon as the door opens, he's gone. And because he's got something else he's got to do. And sitting around and mingling and chit-chatting with board members, that's invisible work. And he doesn't have time for that nonsense, right? He's got to go off and do what he gets paid to do in his mind. What she said was, he really needs to stick around and mingle a little bit with the other board members. He may not like us, but he needs to pretend like he does. Because we want to work with other people that we like. And every time he just runs out of the room as soon as the meeting's over, he's signaling to us he doesn't like us. He's off. We're just another tactical, tasky thing he has to do. So all the things that we know about human beings interacting and people feeling like we're cared for, all the way down to even a handwritten note. A handwritten note, according to these researchers, invisible work. You should never write a handwritten note ever to a colleague, ever. Frankly, anybody, unless they pay you, according to these folks. So I know I'm being a little bit extreme, but actually I don't think I am. I think these folks are so far off on where they're taking this that it's frankly dangerous. It's taking out the humanity from work. It's also preventing us from really connecting, and it's preventing us from getting those opportunities, because all the opportunities in life come from invisible work. So I'll pause, take a drink of water. Whitney, what do you think?
I agree 100%. I felt even your last statement of anything opportunity wise, meaningful that we really do is in the invisible work. I really felt like that's a mic drop moment, because the analogy that you used with the basketball team, if everyone at that C level is not working together, the whole team loses. The invisible work is what makes the visible work happen efficiently. And so if the invisible things are not happening, it really feels like the train can absolutely derail, right? It just locks up, everything breaks apart, no one can get through, no other trains can get through, the whole system breaks down.
Yep, agreed. 100%. 100%. Now, right before we got on our show here today, you were starting to share an example. Would you be willing to share that?
Of course, of course. So a couple of months ago, we were asked to come out and be part of this event. And really, it started with we were just going to do video and photography. And last minute, I'm not sure what happened to prompt this, but I was asked to be MC because I'm going to be there anyway, right? This was the night before the event. I was asked to be the MC. I agreed. I was given the list of speakers that I was to introduce, and that was it. So it was my responsibility to look up and make sure I could pronounce names, get their bio, have all of that together, make sure it was printed and in my hand so that I could confidently step up on that stage, do my job, represent my client well. I knew that was my responsibility. So that's what I did. It was going to impact my job. It was going to impact how we represented the client. I don't know that that ever crossed the client's mind, but I also didn't put an extra line item on the invoice, right? I just did the thing. I did my research that I needed to do for the sheer fact that I wanted to ensure we did a good job for the client and represented them well.
Yeah, beautiful. And so I love that example. And why I wanted you to share that was it's a great example of when we can step up and do invisible work. Now, here's some cases. I want to pivot a little bit. here's some cases when maybe we don't necessarily need to do invisible work or shouldn't do invisible work. I want to go back to Whitney's example, the MC example. I have been asked to MC events before. I have MC'd events before. And contrary to whatever the popular belief is about me, it's really stressful for me to MC an event. It's easier when I know what I'm talking about. People have asked me to help them with a certain thing, but an MC is kind of this glue in the background that kind of holds everything together. And you don't really need to be in the spotlight, but you need to keep everything running. It feels stressful to me. So I typically now, when I've been asked to do it, because usually I'm asked to MC an event that isn't compensated, which is fine. That's a form of invisible work. You get other things, you may just want to do it because you love doing it. You get exposure. But because it's really painful for me, my answer is typically no. It's not painful for you, so your answer is yes. So I think our first reason why, first example of when we might not want to do invisible work or why it might not be good for us is you're being asked to do something that is tremendously painful for you. It's not just an easy kind of above and beyond. And that's a great example. For MC for you, great. For me, not so good. So I'll give you another good example of when doing invisible work can maybe not actually get us what we want, or more importantly, not be the right thing to do. So common, there are understaffed teams, projects missing deadlines. They ask someone to step up and pull some extra weight to get it done. And so you do it, and it gets done, and it hits the deadline. And everyone's like, amazing. And they go thank the senior leader who's in charge of the whole thing. And they come over and thank you, right? And then it got done and you did that. And you got some good brand recognition and people recognize you as a team player and all that's good. That same team, same problem, 6 months later, understaffed, under-resourced, you get tapped on the shoulder, asked to do it again. Now what you're doing is by doing the invisible work, we're perpetuating something that is a problem. We may actually need to go ahead and let it crash and burn. So the organization recognizes we are under-resourced here, and they go and they actually apply the proper resources. I heard a case recently of someone who had finally resigned from a job after they've been asking and asking and asking to get an intern, and they couldn't get one. This person happened to be kind of in youth ministry, and when as soon as they shared their resignation letter, the church said, "Oh well, why don't we get you an intern now? And now let's see if we can talk about maybe paying you more." And by that point, it was too late. So sometimes when our invisible work can end up becoming a handicap, and then people end up taking advantage of us. So I would say that's a second example. If we're constantly becoming a firefighter and brought in, then maybe us doing invisible work is actually, we become the Band-Aid. We become the cost savings for the organization. So one-offs, absolutely. Routine invisible work that should be compensated, that's a little different. But the problem I have with this research is they don't distinguish those two things. They're like anything that you do that's not compensated. Holding a door open for a colleague, that's not compensated. That's invisible work. You saying good morning, that's not compensated. That's invisible work. Having a birthday celebration for a colleague, that's invisible work. You shouldn't do any of that. It's all the humanity. It's funny, two psychologists, and they're stripping all the humanity out of the workplace. So I think we need to be careful. And it goes back to something that everyone who's listened to me over the years has talked about. Life is all about boundaries, setting healthy boundaries. And that comes from my clinical training, but it's also how we need to operate in life. These folks are saying, you really don't know how to set boundaries. So we're going to say anything that's not compensated for is out of scope. No, I don't think so either. I actually think we need to be learning how to set our own boundaries. So if it's something that creates tremendous stress for you, and you're not compensated to do it, you should probably not do that. And then also, of course, if it's something that is, you're being asked to do it regularly and you're covering up a problem in the business or organization, also something that you should probably not do. But there's a whole lot of other things that not only bring us humanity into the workplace, it allows us to really be effective in our jobs that are all invisible work.
So where, Brandon, does a little bit of recognition go into this, right? Of if someone, maybe we're, in the business world, we'd kind of call it scope creep. There's probably a word for that. In the corporate realm. But when you're in between crossing that line of we save the day once and then we're just perpetually putting out fires, or having to rise to the fact that yes, we're under resourced but getting the job done. I feel like a lot of it would just come down to some recognition of, I saw that you went the extra mile here and I really appreciate it, right? Because that almost feels like that's was a little bit of the basis of the article, which I feel like is an easy fix, is that okay, we're doing extra things but we may feel unseen. Sometimes I feel like that's what comes along with doing invisible work. Sometimes you have to do a good bit of invisible work before it becomes noticed, but that's a little bit of a compounded explanation there, but I'd love your thoughts on that, on just how far, recognizing someone goes.
Yeah. So in a perfect world, let's talk about how this should go. In a perfect world, there should be recognition for your invisible work, particularly if it was something that kind of you jumped in and saved the day. And in a perfect world, you'd get that from your manager, but your manager would let their manager know, or maybe even the
Mm.
CEO know, and they would send you a note, or they would stop by and say, hey, I really want to thank you for that extra effort. Perfect world. Now, that, on the one hand, you say to yourself, Brandon, that doesn't sound too far off from reality. No, but the problem is managers typically don't like to let their manager know they had to ask someone to do extra to make it work. They
Right.
in their mind think, I'm not managing well. I had to ask these people to pull extra. And so what my manager's going to say, well, why did you have to ask them to do extra time? So they don't tell anybody. So it's only your manager that gives you recognition. And sometimes what not good managers do is they'll say, oh, thank you so much. One day, at some point, maybe even this year, we can start talking about giving you a promotion. They'll float out there like a possible, like a little tease, like we'll promote you maybe, or give you a raise. And then when they don't do it, now resentment builds in. So then now the person's upset because I went above and beyond. I was happy to do that. But then they made this promise and they broke the promise. Now I'm feeling like I'm just being used. So I do think it's important that managers handle this the right way. Definitely show them appreciation. Don't make any promises you can't keep. And if you can make that recognition go beyond just your role and let other leaders know, that's compensation in its own way. Because by getting,
Yes.
think about this, everyone listening to this, how much would it be worth to you to have every member of the senior team know your name and have you be spotlighted for someone that saved the day? That's really powerful if you like where you work, because now you're on someone's radar and now they're thinking about A, we don't want to lose this person, and B, what are other future opportunities we can give this person. So even appreciation and recognition can be forms of compensation if done the right way.
Yeah. I love that.
So one more thing I would also say around this idea of invisible work. So I naturally have my own business and my own practice. So I customers are very important to me. My clients are important to me, and I work with all different kinds of clients. Everyone listening to this knows that. Higher education, nonprofits, for profits, big, small. I mean, you name it. Government. I work with everybody. And so this year has been an interesting year. It's a little bit slower for me than usual, just a little bit, but enough that it's noticeable. And these kinds of years happen. It's just part of having your own business. It's cyclical. It happens. So if I listened to this article, I would not do anything above and beyond that I wasn't compensated for. And I wouldn't change my rates. I would just say, nope, that's my rate. It's always my rate. If you can't pay that, you don't get anything. That's not how I operate in slower times. Typically what I do is I have a kind of a hotel analogy when I think about how I run my business. And so when I have empty rooms, I fill those rooms. You want your hotel at capacity, and as at least break even. So I fill those rooms. So what does that mean? When I have extra capacity, I go above and beyond. I do extra things for my customers. I've got extra time. I may say, hey, I'm happy to do like some lunch and learn sessions with your teams on author editor. off the meter. I won't charge you anything because I know it's a tough year for your business. Or, hey, I'm happy to come out and do this in person. Normally, I wouldn't have capacity, but in this case, on that particular day, I could. Would you like me to do that in person? So I do those above and beyond things. And the reason why I do it is, A, I have capacity and I want to help my customers, okay, and my
Mhm.
clients. And B, they recognize that. So then when their business returns the following year, they're not cutting me loose. They're doing the exact opposite. They're like, oh, Brandon, thank you so much for helping us last year. Here's some extra things we would love to get your help with, and we can pay you for this time. So it ends up strengthening and solidifying and actually maybe even building a little bit of my revenue streams. So if we look at it from that vantage point, when you have that extra capacity and extra time, think about ways you can do invisible work or extra ways you can make people's lives around you better. That's really what we're talking about here. And that's my fundamental problem with this research. Because all that extra stuff that we do to try and make people's lives around us better, they would call invisible work and say, you need to be paid to do that. I would say that's just being a good human. So I was at a charity event a little over a month ago, and the Atlanta mayor was there, and he had this great quote that he used, and he said he was talking to his pastor, and he said his pastor said, "Love ought to look like something," and
Wow.
that has stuck with me ever since he said it. Love ought to look like something. It looks like actions that you don't get paid to do, but you're doing it because you want to. You're doing it because you care. And I think that's what the point is that I want to get across here. So all this stuff we hear about quiet quitting and invisible work and blah, 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 it's just giving people excuses not to do those things that are so important and special for us. If we think about those leaders that we loved working for the most, it wasn't because they gave us the biggest raises. It was because they did all these little things, the invisible work kind of stuff that made us feel appreciated, seen, and probably most importantly, cared for. And I think that's the secret to having any kind of healthy workplace dynamic and any kind of healthy workplace mode of operating is by thinking about how can we make the people's lives around us better. Now we have to set boundaries and all that. I talked about that, but I want us to come away from this conversation with that spirit, not this spirit of you should get a ledger and you should track all the things they ask you to do. That's not part of your job description. That's not going to lead to anything productive or healthy. Trust me on that. So, Whitney, any kind of closing thoughts or reactions from you?
It made me think of some really smart person said this somewhere. I don't remember who, but essentially the quote is let your work speak for you. It's really the invisible work that speaks for you, that is there promoting you when you're not in the room. It's just as you said, Brandon, that's what everyone remembers when it comes time to make the decision or call on someone that they know that they can rely on. It's all the invisible work that gets you there. And that's the thing that speaks for you.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times, particularly with introverted leaders that are maybe in accounting functions, finance functions, IT functions, I'll be doing the 360s. And people will say, members of their team will say, we really like them, but they just stay in their office all day. It'd be nice if they just kind of walked around every once in a while and just said hello. Just greet me. I'll actually put on their action plan, pick a one Friday a month and bring something breakfasty into the office. It could be donuts, or if you want something healthier, you can go a healthier option. We're not trying to, watch people's nutrition with this. We're just really trying to say, hey, I was thinking about you. And then make a point to kind of walk around and talk to the folks on your team and ask them how they're doing. Just those simple conversations people experience as empathy. These researchers would call it invisible work that you should be compensated for. Ridiculous. So really thinking about how we can do some of those above and beyond things, let our work speak for itself, as you said, and to our actions. And I think if we hold on to that spirit while maintaining boundaries, so watching out for those things that we really just make us incredibly uncomfortable, or those things that we think are actually hurting the organization, kind of when hurting helps. Okay. avoiding that kind of stuff can help us. But I would encourage us all to maybe look at this research and think about what it means to us and what it might mean if we do the exact opposite. Well,
great.
Whitney, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate your time, and for everyone listening to this, be thinking about, what does it mean to you? What were some of those moments in your career where someone did invisible work for you that really helped you? And what would it look like if you did some of those little pieces of invisible work this year, either for your team or for those around you, and how that might actually help everyone land at a better place? So with all of our Leadership Foundry podcasts, it's all about you taking away one thing that you can start doing with your teams today that will help them all thrive starting tomorrow.